This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Body Count, a history podcast where we gab about death and disaster through the ages, highlighting figures, single events, time periods, whatever it may be that resulted in someone, or as is usually the case, a lot of someone's dying. Now, I am your host, Jessica Manor, joined, as always, by my two favorite cohorts. Please introduce yourselves.
Bethany Skilton.
And Kara Dionisio. Thank you. Oh my God, that was so uplifting. I can't get over it. We were all on the same page of happy there. Now, really quickly, I'm going to remind you guys, housekeeping, please, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, go rate and review us and give us those 5 stars. It's not about making us feel good about ourselves. It helps us out on the business end. That being said, we are joined once more by a guest that I have thoroughly enjoyed their content, had a great time with it previously. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself, what it is you're doing, where we find you, and kind of how we follow you, and then recap where we were a little bit, and we'll dive right into this.
Thank you, Jessica. My name's Kenny Ryan. I'm the host of Abridged Presidential Histories. It's a podcast that looks at the successes, setbacks, and scandals of every American president in chronological order, each in 60 minutes or less. You can find my show by searching for Abridged Presidential Histories in Google or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. You can also find me on Twitter at APH Podcast. And what I'm here for on this show is we're talking about what I like to think of as the saga of the night soil. We're talking about how bad sanitation in Washington, D.C. killed 1, 2, maybe 3 presidents in the course of a decade and helped set the country on a path to civil war. So
once again, that's a goddamn thesis point, Kenny. I have to
Again, I was going to say.
I should write a book about this, or at least
the main idea in your hand there, sir, that's succinct. But then again, he gets it wrapped up in 60 minutes or less, which we fail to do here on this podcast. So Kenny, take it away.
Absolutely. So quick catch up to remind you where we're at. And in this story, it starts with the fact that Washington, D.C. has really bad sanitation. Terrible sanitation. Yeah, people are throwing the crap in the street. That crap is getting scooped up and thrown in a lot called the night soil lot, which is located uphill from the White House. And the White House is getting its drinking water from a spring, which is between the White House and the night soil. So whatever's in that night soil lot is trickling underground to the spring, and then they're piping it in from the spring to the White House, and they're just gulping it on down. Just, oh, so fresh. Yeah.
Talk about spring water in a bottle. It just, oh my good Lord Almighty, I'm already
it's like Washington, D.C. has to be one of the top places for bottled water, with a history like this.
Oh God, I really so. Shipping it from somebody they're not spring. It's not spring water. It's like someone else's spring water.
Yeah. If you ever see bottled Washington, D.C. spring water, just hard pass. Right there. No, thank you. So Washington, they got this terrible sanitation system. And in 1840, the Whig Party elects a guy named William Henry Harrison. And 31 days after he's sworn in, he dies. You might have heard of this guy. Most people think he died of pneumonia, but in the last couple of decades, they really started to think it was probably the sanitation and the typhoid in the water that killed him. When he died, his vice president, who nobody ever expected to be president, a guy named John Tyler, became president. And John Tyler pissed off his own party, got kicked out, burned in effigy, is a president without a party, and he decides, I want to be reelected. So to do that, he decides, I'm going to do the crazy thing nobody else will do. I'm going to annex Texas. The reason nobody wanted to annex Texas is because A, Mexico said we're going to go to war with you if you do, and B, it's going to trigger a debate over the expansion of slavery. But Tyler does it anyway. Tyler annexes Texas, and a new guy becomes president, James K. Polk. And Polk uses the annexation of Texas to manipulate the United States into war with Mexico. The United States wins that war. We clobber Mexico, winning all the major battles, and we take 55% of Mexico's land. All California, Arizona, Utah, the whole American Southwest is seized from Mexico in this war. And that's where we left off in the last episode. So that's a quick recap. That's what we did in the last episode.
And that's what we had on Kenny. I was going to say Glee, but that didn't fit. So I don't remember the percentage, but damn, that's a huge percentage of claimed land that was technically Mexico's nonsense. I'm no mathematician. I feel like that's my phrase. But,
well, when you seize a sovereign nation's capital city, you tend to make major hashtag gains, if you will. And I don't mean in the paltry Jim-like-esque way that it's used. No, rather territorial.
Yep. We pretty much took whatever we wanted. And we take all that land. And the thing is, though, we're like, okay, great. We have all this land. We know that this is going to cause a debate now about the expansion of slavery. Because there's going to be this debate as people migrate out there, as all this land first turns into territories, and then from territory to states, there'll be a controversy about is slavery allowed here. But everyone tells themselves, you know what? It's okay. We have time to figure this out because there's nothing of value out there. There's nothing valuable in Arizona, Utah, or California. Nobody's going to have there's not going to be a mass migration out there. And then in the final year of Polk's administration, somebody shows up at his doorstep and says, Sarah, we found gold in California. And so in 1849.
What a cliffhanger. That's a truly TV season finale, honestly.
Right? They show up gold. Fiend, let's wait 6 months, see what happens next. That was a curveball. No one saw that coming.
Nobody.
What a MacGuffin. Let's just put gold in California. There we go. That'll drive the plot along. So when season 2 picks up, it's 1849, and 3 big things happen in 1849. First off, we now know there's gold in California, and the California gold rush is in full swing. 90,000 settlers are going to swarm to California in just that year alone. The San Francisco 49ers, this is why they're the 49ers. This is that big migration. Hundreds of thousands of Americans move there the next few years. And that means we're going to have to grapple with the state issue much quicker than we thought. 2 other things happened in 1849. First, a general that we mentioned in the last episode, General Zachary Taylor, all rough and ready, who was a war hero of the Mexican-American War, he gets elected president as a result of him winning that war. And the third thing is, I promised you some presidential deaths, and James K. Polk is going to die.
You're the only one who's died so far.
Yeah, we're working on number 2 right now. So Polk had always been kind of a sickly guy. He'd been sick all the time in D.C. He survives the presidency, and then he has the shortest post-presidency of any president. About 100 days after he leaves office, 3 months, he gets suddenly hit by, tell me if this sounds familiar, abdominal distress, diarrhea, vomiting, and dehydration, and he dies. It's typhoid, our old friend. That is
It's like the ghost of Christmas past kind of thing going on.
It is. And if I want to be fair to the narrative, he is the one who, maybe he didn't get this from D.C. because he does die 3 months later. He might have picked it up traveling home. He does this long trip, he goes to New Orleans. There's a cholera outbreak in New Orleans at the time, but it's bad American sanitation. Somewhere, he's traveling through some city that's not taking care of its shit properly. And so he catches cholera. Yeah.
To that point, I would argue that any immunologist worth his salt knows that he's been at this particular mill. He's been at it for a while. So you could argue that his immune system is already compromised from the DC system. So we carry that into another city in which it's worse. And I could argue if we're talking about swamp systems with poor irrigation and even worse water supply, definitely that's going to be the follow-up shithole from swamp to swamp, if you will. So yeah, I can definitely see the case for that, and that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I'm glad you made. I think you're absolutely right. He was frequently sick in Washington D.C., frequently suffering from one element or the other. It had probably weakened him and set him up to be finished off on the way home.
It sounds like they were just using other places as a scapegoat to nothing's wrong here.
Do you think maybe he died at the start of the journey and it was weekend at Bernie's and they just tried to pretend he was alive? So oh yeah, it's New Orleans, not D.C. Yeah.
Propped him up with sunglasses, made him out.
I think there's something there.
They did that sort of community thing, like dinner with Andre / weekend at Bernie's sort of thing, if you will, combine both. Yeah, he definitely met with an old friend, but while still being on puppet strings. It was very, very interesting. What a catalog of presidential histories we're breaking into here. But no, we're about to get into some really interesting territory, guys.
We are. So we got 2 presidents down. We'll say that's 2 down, 1 to go. We're going to hit that one pretty quick here. And we're going to continue this march towards civil war. This march that was triggered when we annexed Texas. That's just domino, domino, domino. So the current domino is the California gold rush. All these people swarm California. And they demand, we need to be a state now because there's just no law here. It's the Wild West. It's going crazy. They just on their own, they organize a state convention and they come up with a state constitution. And they say unanimously, we're going to be a free state. There's going to be no slavery here. And it's notable. Even there were Southerners at this convention. And even the Southerners in California at this convention said we don't want slavery here. I don't think they wanted to compete with the slaves in the gold mines. And let's be honest, a lot of the states back here that voted against slavery, they were also just racist assholes who didn't want black people in their state. So that might have been part of it too. So
Okay.
Yeah, so you can't assume that necessarily everybody who's anti-slavery is a good guy, unfortunately. There's still a bunch of dicks on that side too. So California, they send us to D.C. The state constitution. We want to become a state. And in Washington, D.C., this causes a huge fuss. All the northern representatives, all the congressmen, senators from North, they're like, yeah, man, another free state. Let's do it. And all the southern senators and representatives are like, over our dead body. If you try to bring California in as a slave state, we're going to secede. We're going to leave. We're not having it. We refuse. You even have a point where 2 Southern congressmen, they go to President Taylor, and they tell Taylor, if California is not made a slave state, if California is made a free state, we're going to secede. And Zachary Taylor, he doesn't take shit from people, so he tells them that they even try it, he's going to hang them for treason himself. So, just getting real. So let's talk about Zachary Taylor, because this is a huge pivotal moment, and it's all hitting Zachary Taylor. So a bit of background on him. This is a guy who was in the Army his entire life. His first battle that he participated in came during Native Americans in the War of 1812 when he was defending Fort Harrison, as in a fort named after William Henry Harrison, the first president who died earlier this episode. So nice little throwback there. It all ties together. Very nice. So he then goes, he serves in the Second Seminole War, where he fights against some Native Americans and escaped slaves in Florida. And then he goes and he serves in the Mexican War, where he whoops up in northern Mexico, becomes a big hero for some of these big battles he wins. Zachary Taylor is someone who's known for how casual he is. He's a guy who, a new soldier will arrive at the Army, and they're constantly mistaking him for a private, because he's just sitting around in a nice casual hat, comfortable clothing. He's not dressed like a general. So people will show up, they'll think he's an orderly, and they're like, hey, sharpen my sword, polish my boots. And then he'll do it, and then they'll go around where's the general's tent? And someone will eventually point them back, and they're like, oh my god, did I just tell the general? Oh yeah. I'm just gonna I sharpened your sword for you, and they'll be like, oh my god, what did I do? He's gonna kill me. So he enjoyed kind of pranking people like that. This style of kind of living and suffering with the soldiers, of being very much like a troops guy, soldiers guy, it earned him the nickname Old Rough and Ready, which is probably one of the cooler presidential nicknames. Pretty cool. Another thing about Zachary Taylor is he was from the South. He's a Southerner, and he owned slaves, but he didn't support the slaveocracy. He was opposed to the expansion of slavery.
Okay.
And,
all right. Yeah. Allow me to interject here, because I think a lot of people read this and they think, oh, he's some sort of abolitionist king among Southerners, when that is in fact not the case. It's something I see a lot that I think is very, very interesting, when in fact, the ideal of abolition of slavery had never occurred to anyone in America, and in fact had not occurred to Lincoln until it became, a real fuck you to the southern states, I think, and became a point of necessity. So I think before anybody goes around and says, oh, all of Zachary Taylor's statues are sacred, it's an important point that I want to make, is it's more of a classist issue than it is a slavery or abolitionist issue. Maybe not in favor of continuing slavery in other territories, but certainly in favor of continuing it in the South, primarily for his financial benefit. And then you have to look at the agrarian nature of the way of life in the South and how very dependent it was on slave labor, as we're going to definitely see in the Reconstruction as we progress in American history. So I think a lot of people get very excited about this point when we talk about it. And I just really quickly want to be the Debbie Downer and be like, no, he's a classist, not an abolitionist. So let's don't get that twisted.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I was a little confused. I was like, how is this man, what is he fighting for? Why is he doing what he's doing? So thank you for that. I was curious.
In a way, it's sort of like looking at people with billions of dollars who are somehow against the idea of, that are very in favor of the idea of distribution of wealth. Well, you live on $100,000 a year, sir, and distribute your wealth. You will see that is also not the case with President Taylor in sort of the same fashion, in that you've already got people striking gold in California. The last fucking thing they need is slavery added to that, because they're going to have these giant gold-fueled agrarian paradises that definitely rival, nay, destroy his little paradise he's created in the South. So it's a misconception I see from a lot of people that, oh, he's some kind of no, he's not. He's a fucking classist, not an abolitionist. Don't get it twisted.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. Not at all an abolitionist. Nobody really. Nope. There are some in the North, but it's like the Quakers.
They always have been since before we were a nation. And there's definitely abolitionist movements, but don't get it twisted into think he's some progressive grand figure. Oh, he's throwing out the riffraff, a plain old Bernie Sanders kind of guy, which is a lot of the representations that, no.
So,
He's
one
a
of the
fucking,
funny things about it is even kind of on the verge of the Civil War, where the South secedes because they're convinced Lincoln is going to abolish slavery. Lincoln had no such plans to abolish slavery, but it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's kind of like today. You have these information bubbles where people might try to have an insurrection against the Capitol because they're convinced that something crazy happened. Like they're convinced it was stolen. It wasn't actually. Back then, they were convinced that Lincoln was going to abolish slavery, and that they had to then. Like today, people are like, he's going to take away our guns, so we have to stop. He's going to take away our slaves, and that's what triggered the Civil War. So yeah, even back then, it was never a big abolitionist push. It was part of the Republican Party. There were some in there, but the mainstream was we just don't want it to keep spreading. We want to keep it contained in the South. We want it to slowly die out over the next 100 years, slowly, somehow, magically.
Until we imaginary get a wage control program and stop any kind of supposed unionization like you see on the continent among workers kind of thing going on. So I just want it to be very clear, because I read this a lot that everybody thinks Taylor's some kind of, I don't know. No, he's not a pre-hero. This is very much a classist fucking issue for all you.
It definitely feels like the blinders went on in this, and I maybe to change point of view real quick. When you put out California and the gold mines and how they didn't want slaves, I guess in my initial thought was well, that's strange because we're kind of lazy people. Why not have it for us? But then I got to thinking, but we're also greed versus laziness. Like which one way? So of course, why would they want? We don't trust those. Not me, obviously, not me. I mean, back then,
we don't trust a community to mind that. Yeah, no, that's also a little bit of some of the thought. It's an interesting thought process, and it's more than a lot fucked up. My primary purpose was let's not put Zachary Taylor on a pedestal, because believe it or not, I see it happen occasionally in history that, he's this, I see it happen, and I want to not propagate that fucking myth. He's a classist first, and everything else second.
It's very tempting, because that eventually it's going to come, the difference between, say, Democrats and Republicans in treatment of black people. So it's tempting earlier in history to see the Democrats and the Whigs and think, the Whigs, they must be the pro-freedom people. But they're not. They all own slaves too. Those two parties were created so that they would both agree nobody's going to talk about slavery. And then this mess starts getting worse as the Whig Party. It's not long for the world at this point.
Let me put it this way. Nobody can see me, but I'm slapping your awesome stickers, from the dentist, all over your body, shirt, and face right now, because you just put it all. Yeah.
And the one other thing I'll add about why Zachary Taylor didn't want slavery expanded is he also saw how disruptive it was, and he realized that the South, the slave owners are the ones who really are kind of starting the most shit whenever this becomes an issue. So let's just try to contain it where it is. And I'm just going to pick a side. I got to pick a side. We'll pick a side,
And if you're going to have to depend on Henry Clay to fucking straighten you out, nothing good's going to happen from it. You're not headed down a #good path. Still an understatement.
So Zachary Taylor, we've established who he is, and he's like, I am not going to let slavery expand. I'm going to allow California to enact its own constitution that democratically voted for too. This is the uncontroversial thing. California said we want to be a free state. He's like, okay, cool, you can be. And the South is threatening to secede, and he's like, no, I'm going to stop you. And then he dies.
Oh my God.
And then he dies. He dies right then. The Southerners
prepared for you to take me out. I was like, he's like, yeah, do whatever you want, and he's looking over here going, no, I won't let you. And then I was not prepared for you to say these guys.
He died.
With Night Soul?
Well, happily ever after the end.
He's drinking
it would be an entirely different podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Would be named this. Also, he's drinking that shit-filled. I would say it's the Ozark brand, because water's not even good enough to be Fiji at this time. So it's the shit-filled version of Ozark bottled water, if you will. So I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of what Kenny has excellently brought to us.
It's the shit, because the cold Kool-Aid that takes everybody out. It's truly the slow shit Kool-Aid.
And the thing is, he could not have picked a shittier time to die either.
No, he could not have.
Here's some of the other things that were happening, when he dies. The South, they're literally starting to hold conventions to vote on disunion. That's the point they're getting to. They're at the point of we're going to hold a convention to leave. There was an attempt in Congress to create a compromise to get them to stay. And Henry Clay, you mentioned Henry Clay, the so-called great compromiser, twice already. There's been moments like this where he came up with a compromise, they stuck together. He put forth his compromise, his last compromise, and they rejected it. So the compromise was dead. Henry Clay gave up. He went home. There's a convention to discuss disunion in the South, and now Zachary Taylor is dead too, and he's killed like you all know by the night soil. How this happens on July 4th, 1850. He's celebrating the laying of the cornerstone of the Washington Monument, the giant obelisk that Spider-Man fights around in one of his movies. And he eats some cherries, he drinks some iced milk, and he drinks a lot of that old DC water. That night, severe stomach pain set in.
It's not just it's the anti-Pepto. It's small.
Yes.
It's at this point that a flautist literally starts to play for the first time in American history the final countdown. Of course, but you can hear it.
Yep. Stomach pain, July 5th, bloody diarrhea.
That stomach indigestion.
Yes, exactly.
Your whole Tums commercial, basically.
The whole Tums commercial plays out, and then he dies at the end. And the new Tums motto, he should have taken Tums. Yeah.
Well, it literally prevents you from shitting yourself to death. I mean, what a fucking commercial tagline if they'd have had it, right?
Yeah,
that's going to be first and foremost on my over-the-counter purchases. But then again, we are a consumer nation.
So, yeah, I do want to say one thing about him. He has probably the sweetest last words of any president, though. And I'm just a little shed a tear. His last words were, "My only regret is for the friends I leave behind me." Isn't that just oh, Michael? I kind of like you again.
It seems sweet, but then again, if you're his friends, if you're a friend and I was his friend, I take that as a forewarning. Like, oh, fuck, I think it's going to go the exact way that goddamn go. Oh, that's the way the vote's going to go. God, hello, Civil War. It's coming. It's coming for us. Thank you.
Yeah, and the tensions were so high right now. Like I told you how fraught this time was. For over 100 years, there were conspiracy theories that he had been poisoned. And in 1991, they exhumed his body to test it for mercury poisoning. And it was not poisoning. It was the cholera or typhoid from the crappy water. He is 3 for 3, our third president in a decade to die from the drinking water in D.C.
I noticed that
Really quickly. Oh, sorry, Bethany. I got to interrupt you. Really quickly. I'm going to assume it's typhoid, but there's also that cholera chance in there as well.
Yep.
And it's I suppose there is no way for anyone to determine that long after death what was the ultimate killer. Because then again, you're right. We can also throw that cholera fun in there, like love in the time of cholera. Hashtag foreign nation. I don't know. So that's also interesting. It's very interesting. Just shit tons of diseases from drinking. Water full of shit. Yes. Essentially, like shit-filled water is
Maybe.
maybe.
South Park episode where there's like a counter for curse words, and we're about to release like an ancient curse on civilization. And it was worth it. It was worth it. So
100% worth it, man.
I do have I guess maybe a question / maybe observation.
Yeah.
It seems like every time that this, and if, we got a new president. Sorry, it didn't take long before they were gone and deceased. I guess maybe I'm missing something. Whereas when the next person becomes, standing or however they view I am president, view mine, it took them a lot longer. Is it because that they were getting a different water supply, drinking from a different well, or I guess did they not move into the White House and drink the same water?
it's just kind of luck of the draw at that point. Some people die, some people don't. Some it's how old you are too. Zachary Taylor, very old. William Henry Harrison, very old. Like Zachary Taylor's a guy who lived really rough. He's old, rough and ready. So he's worn a bit down.
But during his campaigns, all he has to fight is like maybe I don't know, a beaver amoeba in a stream, and now he's confined to Washington at this great age, and he's drinking shit water. It's the same thing that we talked about, Bethany. It's about immune system. It's about age. It's about health. Like how long it gets to you.
I guess I find it so odd that right off the bat, when they get into office, and they're like, yeah, and then like either 30 days or 100 days, they're gone, and forget. It just feels like I feel like I have like a weird question that I don't know how to ask, if that makes sense, as a person that doesn't look at it from a historical or that kind of viewpoint. So I'm like, wait a minute, something doesn't sit right here, and it feels strange. And I didn't know if that was like a weird coincidence. Maybe just.
I think it's just a matter of timing. I think part of it too is now I'm not a doctor, so I could be totally wrong here. But I think for you to get like cholera or typhoid from contaminated water, somebody has to put some contaminated feces in the water supply. So you got to like way upstream. Someone suffering from this does their business. They throw it in the street. It gets scooped up. It gets thrown in the lot. It trickles underground. It gets to the spring. It gets taken to the White House, and then you drink it with your cherries. And it's just a matter of what day does that happen.
Which is not that far out of the realm, considering these are people living in a swamp that is poorly irrigated. Yeah. They're at this time still drinking from a stream that is roughly 6 blocks away from the local shit heap. Dietary problems. You've got immune system problems on top of that. It's just about the general health of the individual. So wrong day, wrong drink. Plus, there are outbreaks within DC itself. So cholera and typhoid-ridden shits are being thrown in this pile. Rain comes down, then washes into the spring. Like, it's just...
So there's no way for them to actually pinpoint, like, why are these presidents dying?
No. Like at the time, it took a long time for them to nail it down.
Yeah, at the time.
Yeah.
This Zachary Taylor was the one who they're like, okay, that was cholera. At the time, they're like, that was cholera. But a decade earlier, William Henry Harrison, they're like, pneumonia from a long speech like 30 days ago, maybe. And they still think that.
Did he not drink hot soup afterwards? Like, he must be sick, right?
Yeah.
He had hot.
This is why it's important to boil your water whenever there's an issue with sanitation in your city.
Yeah, so every time you guys see boil
PSA.
water, it actually fucking matters to boil your water every time you see those things.
Also, if you're one of those true to form campers that's an idiot and don't like bring your own water and try to pluck it from a Colorado spring, if you will, all you Instagrammers, go ahead and give it a good boil for this reason. You don't know what's in it, and that is just what you do. Quite frankly, I've seen that. Sorry. Yeah, no, like bring it with you. Don't be an asshole.
Yeah. So our third president's dead. Now it's time to just march and follow this through and follow this chain of dominoes impacted by these presidents dying and how this carries us to the Civil War. So Zachary Taylor has died, and who takes over for him? It's a guy named Millard Fillmore, his vice president. And Millard Fillmore is a spineless piece of shit from the North who is really big on ignorance and bigotry. Later in life, Millard Fillmore will join a secret society turned political party known as the Know Nothing Party, and he'll run for president on their anti-Catholic and anti-immigrant platform. And I say this happen later because he's going to lose his re-election with Whigs. He's going to be such a bad president that the Whigs will be destroyed, and there will never be another Whig president again. That is who takes over for Zachary Taylor.
I have never heard of this man before, ever, and I feel a little ashamed.
I'm going to tell you, Bethany, my episode on him just came out today. You should check it out.
Also,
today.
Hashtag he's an American president. So let me just go ahead and comment on that.
I mean, President Fillmore, it's ringing like, obviously it's not something that's like, oh, he did something fantastic. Like, it's not something that's like registering in my mind. But I guess Millard is what threw me. I was like, who the fuck is this? Who is this person? So I think it's the first name that threw me, because now that I'm looking at President Fillmore, it's registering, but his first name threw me. I was a little lost for a second. I was like,
it's like a very distinctive name, so unique. You don't see a lot of Millards, Fillmores, and yet he's still one of the most forgettable presidents,
Yeah, interesting face though.
It might have been, okay. So,
like when we discuss, I guess, topics, why did this is so interesting. I just have to know, like, how do you end up stumbling upon these kind of like themes throughout your show? Does this happen periodically with the research you do that you're like, oh, you see the trend here, and this is pretty funny, or this is rather morbid? Like, I guess, how did you come up with it?
The theme for the show, it was just like literally when I got to Zachary Taylor and I looked back and I was like, that was a lot of people dying of the same thing. And actually, I saw you like put out kind of like a call to action. Does anybody have any stories about people dying? And I was like, yeah, I kind of have a story about 3 people dying because of poopy water. So
Oh, you pitch it like that.
yeah.
And sir,
yeah.
shit-filled water, says the Body Count Podcast. So very well done. Fucking nailed it like Martin Luther. What are you going to do?
Like the impacts of these deaths were so huge. If William Henry Harrison doesn't die, you do not get John Tyler, you do not get the annexation of Texas, you do not get the Mexican-American War. You don't get any of those things.
I love that you relate it to a domino effect because it truly is. And you can actually, not to go down a weird rabbit hole, but think about what would happen if William hadn't died.
Right. Yeah.
It's one of those.
The Whigs still exist.
It's an alternate reality, but I think ultimately it's going to be one of those who were the winners and losers of the Second World War. I think you're going to have that same tumble down sooner or later to a civil war with a winner or loser. And on the timing portion, America doesn't maybe become a global creditor like she becomes, if you will. Like it may be delayed.
Or you might have not a civil war, but the United States is still a slave society. Who knows?
I wish Back to the Future actually did Back to the Future with, historical relevance. Other than whatever the fuck they did. I love Back to the Future, but dang, they could have done some serious business with what
I just want to see, there's like shows and movies where they go like alternate universes. I want like a next Marvel movie where they go to an alternate universe for the Whig Party to still be there. I want there to be a Whig president in the next Marvel movie.
I thought you were going to say you wanted to Man in the High Castle, the TV, not the book, of course, but you wanted a TV show, Man in the High Castle, but America without shit-filled water in DC. So that's actually a great premise. Netflix, fucking get on that. Do something about it.
Here I'm thinking of tagging Seth MacFarlane and having a Family Guy episode about it.
No, I'm gonna send Kenny's idea to Netflix. Like, Kenny Ryan, like Jesus Christ.
Instead of the dig, it can be night soil.
That's the title. That's the fucking title. Night soil.
Night soil.
I see it now, man. Instead of like Nightcrawler, night soil.
I know it sounds like you see that and you're like, what's night soil? I want to know what night soil is. You're like, whoa.
Sounds like
That's the exact thought process that happened to me. I was like, nice, to be honest.
It sounds like a fucking comic book Alan Moore would have written in the 80s. I love everything about it. Night soil.
We were discussing temporary President Fillmore.
Yes.
Totally forgettable President Fillmore.
Yes.
Bad. And so what was it that I guess I know we got a little off.
Yeah.
Topic.
So Millard Fillmore is this total putz. He becomes president, and he inherits this crisis. The South is talking about leaving. There was a compromise. The compromise seems dead, and everyone's like, Millard Fillmore, are you going to save us? And he's like, no. The first thing he like fires his whole cabinet on day one. He has nobody ready to replace him. He spends like the first few months just trying to like figure out what he's doing in the White House. But meanwhile, in Congress, in the Senate, another guy steps onto the scene. Stephen A. Douglas. This is a senator from Illinois, I believe, famous of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. He's pretty much like the man of the 1850s. He kind of tries to pick up. Henry Clay dies around this time, and he's like, I'm gonna be the next Henry Clay. I'm gonna take Henry Clay's compromise. I'm gonna find a way to pass
I'm
it.
gonna be the next influence Instagram. Not influence. It's like basically he was like, I'm gonna be the new influencer.
I'm gonna be the Kim Kardashian of Congress.
In fact, to be fair, Stephen Douglas and Lincoln inspired an entire subset of debate that's not cross-X for all you debate folk out there that have ever done Lincoln Douglas debates, and they are a bitch because they are not fact and brief-based, and I hate the entire debate genre. That being ignored, it's a lot of fun.
I've got a lot of baggage to unpack here on Stephen Douglas with you, Jessica.
No, more appropriately, Lincoln Douglas debate, but I'm a cross-X gal, so.
Good. So Millard Fillmore becomes president. He totally like blows it. He's not all prepared. But Stephen Douglas comes through and he gets the compromise passed through Congress, and it makes its way to Millard's desk. So Millard didn't do anything, but the compromise is now here. All he has to do is sign it. And this is another big thing because Zachary Taylor had said he would not sign this. Zachary Taylor thought this compromise gave too much to the South. But Millard Fillmore, he said, screw it, I'm going to sign it. For a couple reasons. One, he thought that if he did something good for the South, it might help him win re-election. Two, the South is threatening to secede right now, so he thinks if I just give them what they want, that will end that threat. And the compromise of 1850, it does a lot of things. It blocked slavery in California. It gave the Californians what they want, but it allowed it and the rest of the land taken from Mexico, which was not what the people who lived there wanted. But most infamously, the biggest thing it did is it had a new fugitive slave law. This law was totally bonkers crazy. It basically said any northerner who gave any assistance to an escaped slave could be fined. There were now federal slave catchers all over the country who could be sued if they didn't do their job. And if a man is accused of being an escaped slave and they're brought before a judge, they can't speak in their own defense. And if the judge says you're an innocent man, you need to be let go, the judge is paid $5. But if the judge says you're an escaped slave and you need to be returned to the South, the judge is paid $10. So the law literally says we're going to pay judges twice as much anytime they say this person's a slave, send them back to the South.
Wow. Talk about this being rigged.
Yes. And the North gets super pissed off by this. Even if you weren't really involved yet, now you're like, wait, hold on. I'm seeing stories about men who have lived in my community for 20 years being ripped from their families and shipped south, not even being allowed to speak in their own defense. Like this stuff is crazy. And Millard Fillmore starts really pushing the issue. He's really forcing this issue. And it's pissing him off. Like he hears, for example, there's an abolitionist convention in New York. There's like 5,000 abolitionists there. And he hears that he knows that one of them is an escaped slave. So he orders federal marshals to go and capture that guy to take him back south. And when they capture the guy, the whole you have a convention of people, 5,000 people are like, we're not gonna let this happen, and they show up outside the courthouse and they rescue the man and they sneak into Canada. So all this is doing, it's crazy. It's just antagonizing the North, giving the abolitionists easy opportunities to fight back and then feel empowered by that. So you're poking them in the eye, you're forcing them to respond, and they're responding, and then they're like successfully responding, and you're really strengthening this cause up in the North. His enforcement of this rule splits his party. The Northerners, they give up on him. They hate him, and they give up on the party. The Southerners, they like support him and they support this law, but in the next election, the party doesn't renominate him. They nominate someone else. That guy gets clobbered, and the Whigs never run again. This so severs the North and South wings of the party that the Whigs are effectively killed by Millard Fillmore.
Holy
damn.
shit.
That should be on his tombstone, man. Like
What's
wig
that?
killer.
Wig killer.
That should be on his tombstone. Like wig killer. That's it.
Yeah, and I've done to him a lot. I mentioned he's going to run later on this like Know Nothing party. He's going to kill that party too by being such a bigot. So he kills two political parties. And the Know Nothing they were very nearly.
Sorry, I don't mean like what you said earlier. I feel like this guy would not be relevant at all.
Yeah.
If it had not been for C, B, and A.
Yes.
Or take it backwards, or EDF. If we really want to.
This is just another domino. There were dominoes before and that set him up, and there's dominoes after that he'll help push down.
See, I'm a big what if, I guess.
Yeah.
They can present to me, hey, think about what if this happened, where would it be? Because I'm very open. I'm open-minded. That's why I like learning about history. Is like present and tell me something that opens up my mind a little further. And this is literally blowing my mind right now because we would be in a different. I feel personally we'd be in a different political society if they had just made sure the Americans had clean, healthy water. Okay.
Yes.
That's not how much to ask.
You ask too much, Bethany. Wait, wow. Yeah, and so from the end of his term, it's pretty much the 1850s are like a dead sprint to the Civil War after this. Part of that compromise, I mentioned it opened up all this land taken from Mexico to slavery, and that made the Southerners in Congress and in the Senate say, hey, if slavery is not allowed at all this land, we think that means this also applies to any land left from the Louisiana Purchase back in 1804 or whatever it was.
Bring it back to Jefferson.
Bring it back. So they make so much noise about this. And again, like, we're going to secede if you don't let us put slaves in this territory, because there's still like all the land that's like Kansas, Nebraska, like all those states that is still not even organized territory. Nobody's moved there yet, and they're like, you need to let us take slaves there. And they make such a ruckus that another law is passed, and this law only happens because of the compromise sets the groundwork to. And this is called the Kansas-Nebraska Act.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I got my Kansas friend Bethany here.
Hi. Yay.
We get another Kansas reference that I want to spoiler is not the Wichita Shocker.
Kenny, do you know about the Wichita Shocker? Everybody at this point.
I know about the Wichita Shockers. What's the Wichita Shockers? Isn't that like the name of the team there?
Yeah, but we'll discuss it.
There should be a body.
You are
body
correct,
count for this.
Kenny. That is who you're thinking. But the horrific mascot and the general motion that they seem to wave at the world during game time. You are correct about the Wichita Shocker. Thank you. You're also knowing how shocking. Oh, God damn it.
I feel like if we were Cards Against Humanity, that's always our trump card. We're like, when this spice up the moment. The Wichita Shocker.
Actually, Kenny, by the way, the Nebraska-Kansas feud is something that we were heavily, thrown at with our history books.
Really? I was going to bring up the Kansas-Missouri feud, because that's from part of this story.
Yeah,
what's the Kansas-Nebraska feud?
That's a much. I love a corn fight. They just throw corn husks at each other over the border, and then the rest of America doesn't care. But the Kansas-Missouri fight, I'm interested in.
Oh, yeah. We're getting there pretty quick here. So they come up with this Kansas-Nebraska Act. And the Kansas-Nebraska Act, there's all this fight. The Southerners said we should allow slavery in this land. And this law said how this will split that land up into a few different territories. And each territory can vote for itself if it will allow slavery. Which, that sounds like democracy. That makes sense on the surface. We'll let people vote for themselves.
And
surely.
also husk corn at one another, I assume. It's
of course.
just
There's not
they're wheats and corns at each other and sawdust at one another.
We still do that. It's still a thing. Like, every once in a while, we throw chunks of wheat and corn at each other.
When I'm doing an American road trip and I'm on my way to see Santa Ana's Lake in Illinois, I'll stop to throw some corn husks at people in Kansas and Nebraska.
Hey, I got a road trip one for you. William Henry Harrison's home in Vincennes, Indiana, like 30 minutes north of me. Yeah.
Go away.
Watching actually, I know, and it's so strange. So because of his governorship of the Indiana Territory, even though Indiana was not a state at that point, obviously, I don't know. Indiana has this weird hard on for Harrison.
Really?
Harrison, I might clarify. Benjamin Harrison almost more rightfully so, because at least he died in Indianapolis, and his home was really, really interesting to visit. I might add.
Yeah.
No, seriously, Indiana has a hard on for both of them, and it's not just like the whole Tippecanoe and Tyler 2 shit either. I might add. Which is always, that's one of the few takeaways I have, and the few early memories of John Tyler is Tippecanoe and Tyler 2.
That's the thing everybody knows about. He's the Tyler too.
Which, can I just add, my mother, and this is going to be the weirdest story ever, but it was height of the pandemic, right? I went back to Texas, and my mother is a very avid, I do get it from somewhere, she's a librarian in the truest sense of, she's a degree queen, but she collects antiques like nobody's business. So she gets pins that used to be manufactured from all that shit. So I was had Tippecanoe and Tyler 2 shit, as well as, yes, and she'd be very happy if she knew I did this, because she puts these things in all these boxes in her collector's boxes. But I had that from get your ass off my White House grass Dewey pins, and I pinned them all in my shirt and went into the backyard and marched around as I laid sod as if I were Napoleon with her traditional bicorn hat. She would be so unhappy if she knew I had done this, but I definitely did this shit. To be fair, though, it was a Texas afternoon. My father and I were drunk in the middle of quarantine and put on all of her campaign pins from across history, war medals, and he wore a World War II helmet, and I put on a Napoleonic bicorn, and we laid sod together as
There's why is there a Twitter picture? I want to see a profile picture of you in this attire doing this.
That's a reality I never want the world to see, because imagine the level of drunkenness.
This is the reality that your base craves for. This is what would get you viral. This is your marketing moment, so to speak.
That's your album cover. Your album cover is that.
Because I assume two drunk Texans of two different generations dressed up as full soldiers with multiple campaign pins and war medals, watering sod in the backyard and playing cornhole isn't exactly a fucking feature of Instagram.
This is the type of album cover that college kids put up in their dorm rooms.
Oh God, on their ceiling, on the people when they lay down at night.
And then they're like, oh, do you not know about them? I know. They feel like, no,
Your expression right now is an album cover feeling. If we get that sepia tone on it, I can feel this is so kind of mood angst. Listen to vinyl while fucking I don't know, pouring a glass. Hipster fuck with a little nuance, if you know. And
I was just gonna say that's the Botox and the wrestling, but however you want. Do it at a young age. I've been doing it since 26. Go for it, ladies.
I wonder what would happen if one of our presidents had a liposuction. Sometimes I think about these things.
I think Donald Trump probably has.
No, but the one that got okay. Hey, this is a test the trivia magnet kind of question. Did a president actually get stuck in a bathtub? True or
No.
false?
False.
No.
True. Yep,
False.
exactly. But if it would have been, who would it have been?
I was going to facetiously ask, is that how you got tapped out of that bathtub?
My God, I would love to die in a bathtub though, or like be lifted out. Like to be honest, like
Okay.
I'm not that big, guys. I might add. Okay, to clarify, I'm not gonna get stuck in a bathtub.
Because I'm drunk in one nightly, so I mean, it's only a matter of fucking time, really. I mean, it's a numbers game.
Honestly, what is the best presidential funeral? I have to know this.
That's
I think Lincoln's is pretty legendary, but he got
Lincoln is
lost
legendary.
in the body,
What
right?
wasn't Lincoln too like a young Teddy Roosevelt like saw it out a window or something like that?
It's one of those situations where a lot of like people claim to have seen it, if you will.
Yeah.
However, man,
Okay, hold on. Here's a crazy trivia thing for you. So William Henry Harrison, the day of his funeral in Washington D.C., there's a born free black man from New York happens to be in D.C. that day.
What's his name?
Solomon Northrop. He had met some guys who told him to come on down. We'll play some music in D.C. And while he's there for William Henry Harrison's funeral, they spike his drink, abduct him,
No.
and sell him to slavery in the South. 12 years later, he
Jesus
escapes. Or
fucking
not escapes, he's
Christ.
freed his spot by his friends, and he writes his memoir, 12 Years a Slave. The memoir, 12 Years a Slave, the start of that story is the day of the funeral of William Henry Harrison.
Damn.
Yeah, it all ties back to poopy water. It all does.
God damn it, Harrison. Like, if he had only drank liquor, this would not have been a problem, honestly.
Actually, I was thinking, like, why?
I'm
were-
sorry, does he think he's better than a Plantagenet? He can't just drink wine and port and just live on whatever? La-ti-da, sir. La-ti-da. Drinking water like a fucking peasant? No, I'm sorry, but seriously. Like, alcohol for a reason, guys.
Oh shit. Anyways,
I
really.
wonder, like, why, I guess, it makes me wonder if that's a part of the reason why presidents were, like, such drinkers. Like, if it was kind of commonplace knowledge, you know what I mean, not to drink the water, so to
Right.
speak. Like,
I mean,
Like from pregnant women, you know, like when they say, "Oh, don't drink the water because all the women are pregnant." Maybe that phrase is from "Don't drink the water" back in the day.
holy shit, holy shit. Full circle, let's make it a thing. That's what happened. That's where it's from. It would be water.
To be fair, I think all of our presidents before the one mentioned were staunch fucking drinkers and didn't need encouragement even before shit stream
Actually-
aquifer is introduced. So
you know what's kind of funny to me is you'd asked, like, why did some of these other presidents not die? And the 1850s had some hard drinking presidents.
yes, it did. That's my point. That's my point. Like everybody was a goddamn drinker, and then all of a sudden this motherfucker wants to break with hashtag water. Ew.
Yeah.
Look at him trying to be a person in a revolution. No,
No.
it's not because they were none of them confined to the shit can that is DC. I do agree. Like this is really really interesting, and I'd love to get back to it because it very much does spiral downhill because these three assholes chose to drink the water.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Big mistake. So let's go back to the dominoes. So where we left, was the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which said we're going to cut up this territory into a few different territories, this land into a few different territories. Each will vote for itself if it wants to be free or slave, which sounds great on the surface and will look great because surely you're not going to have mobs of pro-slavery border ruffians cross the border and stuff ballot boxes, right? Like that wouldn't happen.
Everybody's just gonna vote freely, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not a
Right.
thing.
So,
Yeah, we're not going to have like a fraudulent election in Kansas. That would that happened.
Well,
We did.
Even if we do, it's only 6 electoral votes. It's not gonna matter.
So yes,
Well,
yeah.
there's only a couple of thousand hanging chads, right? Not
Right,
like
right.
100.
Oh, like this is beyond hanging. So what happens in Kansas is
They're dimpled.
yeah,
Right?
they're not even trying to be cute around this. Like this stuff is nuts. This is what election fraud really looks like. So the day that you're supposed to elect the delegates who are going to go, create the territorial government and decide is this a free or slave territory, the day that election's going to happen, tons of slave-owning, pro-slavery border ruffians cross from Missouri, which was a slave state, right next to Kansas, and they capture polling places. They refuse to let people vote if they're going to vote for a free state. They stuff ballot boxes to make sure that their side wins, and they elect this blatantly fraudulent pro-slavery Congress, which immediately goes about passing crazy laws. Like you can only run for office if you promise to support slavery forever in Kansas.
And then here's the fun thing about it. Everybody's a fucking hashtag gunslinger back in those days. So some folk come to dispute that fact.
Sitting here over here going, man, this is a total Mean Girls rigged homecoming queen election. And I was like, Katie Herring is all of a sudden. I wasn't part of the plan. You weren't. I was nominated. Like, it just feels very Mean Girls vibes here, or at least that's where Mean Girls got their idea.
but nobody was hashtag surprised.
Yes. You can't sit with us, okay? You can't sit with us. Wednesdays we wear pink, okay? So.
And what do you do when you can't sit with them? You form a shadow government. Well, that's what the free state people did in Kansas. So
Yes.
So you get the slavery government set up, and they're passing these crazy, like literally, if you pass around abolitionist literature, they can execute you. Like it's a capital offense. So you just hand
Oh,
out.
damn, that sounds like it's right at Marjorie, what's her face's name? Miss Q.
Oh, yes, Miss Green, something like that. All right, so we have this madness in Kansas. We have this fraudulently elected pro-slavery government. Everybody in Kansas is like, that's bullcrap. They elect a shadow government of pro-freedom people, of anti-slavery people. These two sides start fighting. This part's actually interesting to me. I'm a huge fan of like college football and college sports, and I was in the Big 12. When I started Texas A&M, and I'm all about the SEC. And I see right here, Bethany's wearing her Jayhawk shirt, and that's where I'm going with this. The Free State Militia became known as the Jayhawks. They were Jayhawkers, and years later, when the University of Kansas was looking for a mascot, they said we're going to be the Jayhawks, and they tied back to that. Missouri.
I knew that, by the way. I have grown up on KU Jayhawk basketball my entire life, and I knew that. It was a weird, fun fact I knew, and you stole it, Kenny. But,
Well, but you can tell me who are the big rivals of Kansas?
okay, we actually, well, first of all, at this point, everybody now. Okay? Well, the Jayhawks. When we get to college basketball, everybody likes to score us, but it is, in my opinion, at least Missouri is one.
Missouri.
Anybody in the Big 12, so that includes Oklahoma State University, Texas Tech.
Yeah.
TCU is even, I believe, TCU's in our conference.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few Texas people, Oklahoma. So yeah.
Oh, wait, am I right? Does Kansas change its fight song? So there's always a lyric about every school in the conference?
There's a way actually in any, okay, you're talking to a dance major who was on a dance team for colleges in Texas, by the way. There is a phrase in just about anybody's fight song that allows you to input either their mascot or their college name, whatever kind of fits, whether it's, the Raiders or Texas. It depends on how it fits in the song.
Yeah.
There's a point in the song where you are able to change it depending on who you are playing against.
So the reason I brought up these rivalries, you mentioned Missouri, like 100-year-old rivalry. And Missouri, they're the Tigers. The origin of the Tigers is that was the name of a pro-Confederate militia in Missouri after the Civil War. So there's a sports rivalry that is still named after the pro-free state militia and the pro-slave state militia.
We actually have shirts that say "Muck Mizzou" instead.
Mizzou?
We have shirts that say that. I mean, it goes pretty. I mean, obviously deeper than people think it's just a sports rivalry, but it goes deeper than that.
Yeah. So we have that happening. We have people from Missouri raiding Kansas, setting up this fraudulent election, and it just continues to spin. And bleeding Kansas, it becomes such a hot mess of blatant corruption and suffering. I mean, like you get a new president, James Buchanan. He really wants the pro-slavery government to take hold in Kansas, so he's putting out bribes. He's hiring prostitutes. He's doing like this is just beyond the pale corruption, and it's so over the top. And it's so over the top that it ends up fracturing the Democratic Party. To the point where in 1860, the Democratic Party runs two candidates. One candidate who's pro-slavery, very pro-South, and another candidate who's just more moderate on the slavery question. And that splitting of the Democratic Party opens the window for the Republican Party and Abraham Lincoln to win the White House. And that right there, these dominoes that have been happening. We've killed the Whig Party. We've split the Democratic Party. The Republicans are now on the scene. This is their chance. And when Lincoln gets elected, the South is so convinced that he's going to abolish slavery that they immediately begin seceding. And they totally secede over slavery. Like, read any of the thing written by anybody in the South about why they seceded. And they're like, we're seceding because the North is going to get rid of slavery and we have to secede to protect slavery.
This is actually where I get, as a non-historical, I try my best, but I'm not fluent in procedures. This is where I get conflicted because I have two very smart 9-year-olds, and I've had one, I guess it was several months ago, that said my favorite president ever is Abraham Lincoln because because he abolished slavery, because he did this and I'm like, well, actually, I don't know that much, but I do know this, and it kind of shattered her.
Oh, don't do that. I like Lincoln. Lincoln's great.
No, he's great. No, I wasn't trying, and I even told her kind of like crush your dreams here, but I wanted to give her the reality of just what I know from historical fact and where he was at.
And he was definitely someone
when
who
he
abolished
abolished slavery.
Yeah,
he definitely evolved, and it's a fantastic thing. Like, definitely.
The debate
So I
about
understand
Lincoln,
what you're trying to say.
the thing to learn from Lincoln isn't that he was always right; it's that he admitted he was wrong.
Yeah. Okay. See, and sorry, I don't want any viewers to take what I just said wrongly in any way. But it is a the thing about our heroes are, we all have faults, and we all have to like own up to them, I guess, or they all catch up to us. But it's interesting to pull this all into how he even became a historical figure in the first place, because we don't know if he would have been here if it hadn't been for the poop water.
The poop water and all those other dominoes. Yeah.
It's crazy how it ties back to shit.
Yeah. And
Everything always ties back to shit, man.
I mean, there's a book out there. Everybody poops. We know it's true.
What's that whole expression?
So one of the last acts by some of these dominoes too is as the Southern states are seceding. I mentioned James Buchanan, he's the president, and he lets them all go. And this ties back to Zachary Taylor, because remember Zachary Taylor, he was gonna be like, no, I'm not gonna let you do it. I'm gonna call the army, I'm gonna hang you if you try. James Buchanan took the total opposite approach. He didn't do it, and it allowed the South to build momentum. He gave them like a running head start of like 4 or 5 months. His Secretary of War, who would serve as a Confederate general, was sending like guns and artillery to the South to make sure they had a good start to this war. So it's a huge difference of we get to another crisis moment, and this time we have a president who just lets it happen and makes it worse. If Zachary Taylor had forced the issue in 1850, he probably would have nipped it in the bud pretty quick, and he wouldn't have had such a destructive civil war. Who knows what would have happened? But he probably wouldn't have had the destructive civil war. So in 1861, the Civil War begins. Almost 1 million Americans die, like 750,000. And in case you're curious, DC sanitation system is still claiming victims. I couldn't find numbers for DC, but in general, bad sanitation, dysentery killed 95,000 Confederate and Union troops. And then typhoid killed 65,000. So nearly a fifth of the 75,000 Americans who died in the Civil War, nearly a fifth died because of bad sanitation in their army camps or wherever they're deployed. And there were still deaths in the White House. Abraham Lincoln's 11-year-old son, Willie, died of typhoid, likely in White House drinking water on February 24th, 1862. So you still have people dying.
It's probably released to the public as typhoid, but classified as shit water. Damn, that is just...
So that's the story. That's the story of the night soil of the 3 presidents who died in a decade, of the impact of this, how bad sanitation and the nation's capital killed 3 presidents and helped cause set the stage for the Civil War.
You know what kind of disturbs me is I feel like you didn't end this with, and the problem was solved, and there was no...
That wasn't solved.
Exactly.
No, I think it's a couple decades later that they start to build a modern sewage system. I'm pretty sure I looked it up, and I didn't write it down, I forget when, but maybe a decade or 2 later is when they'll start to build more of a modern sewage system in Washington, D.C.
Still a decade too long, period. I'm sorry. I mean...
3 presidents too late, so to speak.
Yeah, it feels like everything that was available was an easy out in the sense of disease or outbreak. They were like, oh, we can just... Sometimes we'll just... I'm sorry to say, it sounds like COVID. Oh, you died of the flu? Oh, make it COVID. Not that COVID isn't claiming lives, but I'm just saying, like, it's a very...
If anything, it's going the other way these days. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of states saying people died of pneumonia at rates that we've never seen people die of pneumonia before. Which, hey, William Henry Harrison died of pneumonia, everyone thinks.
It's very easy to put down. It's interesting to see that, like, it took that long for our symbolism of capitalism, of our democracy, to be like, hey, maybe we should have clean drinking water. for the people that run our country. I don't know.
I mean, today, if we want to really tie this to the current, how out of repair are our water systems in the United States? We've seen what happened to Flint. That was a sanitation system that was not maintained. And there are small towns all over the country that installed these pipes, the sanitation systems 100 years ago, and they're breaking, and you're going to start seeing more people die of bad sanitation, more people getting sick of bad sanitation all over the country.
It's not just bad sanitation, but there is a real issue of heavy metal poisoning with a lot of iron piping.
Exactly.
So if you think bad sanitation is bad, I assure you, Bethany, that heavy metal poisoning is nothing you want to deal with either, because that's a real diagnostic fuck off.
Right, and that's what I guess, like, as a commoner, as a non-historical buff person, everybody knows, our listeners know where I'm at.
As a United States citizen, you will, and that's like
thank you very much.
discussion.
Where I'm at is like, why isn't this a relevant thing? Even when Flint, Michigan, even as a person, why are we asking for clean water? Why is that just not a
Bethany? It's the same issue of why are we allowing homes to blow up in South Texas because of Atmos Energy's poor gas piping system? No, it's not. It's something that is very much in the forefront of America's political perspective. Trust me, everybody every day is tweeting about water in Flint, Michigan. This is something that is at the forefront. It's not being done because there's no money in it. There's no glamour in it. There's nothing to be gained by anyone in the political sphere.
And still want to pay higher taxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a prime example of where I post Bethany 2024. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say is
Bethany 2024, no poopy water.
No poopy water for anybody.
That's a good campaign.
Like hashtag no shit water. Yeah, I mean, you're already doing better.
And I could win big.
I mean, you know that William Henry Harrison that was his campaign slogan. You know, if only I had run on that.
Literally,
no poopy water. Yeah.
No shit water too.
Really non-runoff.
Kara, you just nailed that. I've never laughed to do no shit water too. That is fantastic. That is, oh my God, how upset my mother will be when I go change all those buttons, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. Oh my God, that's fantastic. At least one. She's a collector.
Holy shit, in this case, come on, damn it. Kenny, you've been awesome. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
this.
I've had a wonderful time.
I feel like you have seriously taken the words crap, shit, and poop to a whole
Out of
nother
the vernacular.
Or rather,
Out of the vernacular.
night soil. He's
Night
made
soil, yes,
part
night soil.
of the vernacular. He's added to the overall vernacular.
Coming
I'm
soon.
going to
The
now
dig into
say-
night soil.
I laughed so hard I night soiled myself, or something people you know, like
I think you should just
my
like copy,
God.
like people like what's everything like, oh, that's where I keep my night soil, and then just let them wonder, you know, like what, what's that? Yeah, what's
I
night
laughed
soil?
so hard
Night soil.
I night soiled myself, you know, like it's going to be a recurring thing and a recurring theme. Kenny, you've been an absolute dream of a guest. You have really woven a narrative around body count and the most fantastic, like bizarre, out of the way central theme that I could ever hope, and really brought something that I don't think a lot of our viewers are familiar with, nor will they recognize within the narrative. It was absolutely, and I say this highest of compliments, you blew me out of the water. It was absolutely one of the best episodes I have ever done, and I really enjoyed this. Like,
I'm
truly
glad I blew you
fantastic
out of the water
content.
because you don't want to be in the water. You really don't want to be in that. So I'm glad I blew you out of the water.
No, because it's full of shit. If
Exactly.
you learned anything, it's just like an entire pool of sort of, I don't know, a Caddyshack situation, like, but not a candy bar, just a pool of not candy bars. If I've learned anything, and you don't want to snorkel in it because sooner or later, you know, you're going to get accidental feedback. So, Kenny, where do we find your podcast? Where do we find all that is the world's view and awesome and your succinct storytelling within 60-minute segments?
You can learn more about all the presidents in order by looking up my podcast, Abridged Presidential Histories. You can Google it or search it on any podcast platform. If you don't find it on your podcast platform, hit me up on Twitter and let me know. I'm APH Podcast on Twitter, and I'll make sure to get it wherever you want to listen to it. Where just today we came out with Millard Fillmore, who we talked about earlier. We'll do an episode a month, so we got Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan. It's gonna be a fun year in 2021. We'll get the whole Civil War. We'll get Reconstruction. It's gonna be great, guys.
Awesome. Lots of history learning that we should have known beforehand.
Coming up on a real history bitch, and if you get it done in 60 minutes through Reconstruction, I'm going to be color me #impressed if you can get through them all in 60 minutes. I fucking dare you. No, I'm just kidding. Like, you're fantastic. I love your podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Lick that fucking pole. See how it turns out. No, you're absolutely fantastic. I love your podcast. It's great stuff. That being said, Kara, where do we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Kara DiDonizio. You can also find me on Instagram at Kara.DiDonizio. I'm usually most active on Twitter. You can also find me at Time Travel Talks, which, as I mentioned in the first segment, has some pretty exciting stuff coming up here in the next few months. And stick around, become a part of the community, become a part of the Discord, send me a message. We're coming up with some great ways to talk about history, and we actually have an article that Kenny has written that is going to be one of our launching products that I'm really excited about. So we have some good stuff in the oven, and so you can follow that on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Time Travel Talks, and it's usually me running that. So 9 out of 10 times you DM that, it's probably me, but on the other off chance it could be Leah. So anyways, now where do we find you ladies, Miss Jessica and Miss Bethany?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Bethany Skelton5. That's all lowercase. You can find me at the same Twitter handle with a capital BS for my initials, always capitalized on the BS. Now, I want to add something on this particular episode. I'm going to be, whenever this post, you'll be, by this time, you'll see that it's a regular post. But unfortunately, I did lose a friend over the weekend, and due to a horrific car accident, not by her fault, rather. But if there's anything in history that I've learned, that life can be taken suddenly, and unfortunately, her family is left with expenses beyond what you can truly imagine. So I will be posting regularly where you can donate, even if it's just $1, $5, whatever it might be. It goes to a great cause. It's really just meant for this young woman. She's only 38, and she leaves behind 2 preteen teenage daughters with no life insurance, nothing to support her family. So anything that you guys can reach out and help for would be awesome. Jessica, where are you?
Hold on, I just want to say, I'm going to interrupt Bethany. I'm just so sorry for your loss. I hope this episode has given you a distraction for the past few hours. And I encourage everybody, please, I'm going to keep an eye out for that too. And yes.
It's one of those things that I feel like body count is touched upon. We don't fully grasp as a human race how important certain things are until there are deaths. We don't create laws. We don't create life insurance policies. We don't think about things like that until certain things happen. And this was actually a very sudden, random, weird, well-loved person and that it happened to. So it's one of those things that has, I feel like, as a community, we can always reach out and grasp people that we don't know. Obviously, we're going through something that you never know if you go through as well. So, but yes, so thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been interesting. And I appreciate the distraction. Actually, this is exactly what I needed, is some history lessons on what life has to give you. So.
Well, if I've learned anything about humanity, it's that we can come together over shit-filled water, and we certainly have tonight.
Amen.
That being said, you can follow the show at Body Count Pod at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can follow the website at Body Count History Pod. We're going to launch that either this week or next week, the new website with a whole lot of stuff that's going to be added in, articles, scripts, all kinds of stuff like that is going to come out. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. That being said, we're also going to have merch up very soon with that, so stay with us. And we're also going to, in the next month, 2 months, as you know, we're very, very busy getting new content out to you, but we're also going to have things going to our Patreon, and I'm going to start doing some stuff, and some different people are going to start doing some stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Do follow us on social media for any updates there. That being said, I think we're going to be done with this episode. Kenny, you were absolutely fantastic. Pardon, yes, sir.
Thanks so much.
Shitwater, that was amazing.
You and Jerry, we don't like meet like Jerry from Presidency's podcast, because like you two do have different ways of approaching presidential history in both incredibly interesting ways. So I want to make this interaction happen. Like,
it does. We need to get to know each other better.
She wants to do a presidential histories bra, like TED Talk. In essence.
You need to have us both on sometime, and we need to have a contest of who can have the craziest presidential related death stories or something
don't
like that.
give me ideas.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you mean I can be a presidential bra hype man? Is that what you're like? Oh my God.
And there's one more. I don't know if you've heard of Howard Dorr from Plotting Through the Presidents.
I've seen it. Yeah.
So I need. Oh my God, we need to get all three of y'all.
And in the left corner, weighing at 2 terms, is president.
I would love to see. Oh man, I have so many high hopes and dreams for this. That will happen.
And then the same flautist I spoke of earlier starts playing the final countdown, so it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to have the Lexington Concord March followed by the final countdown on flute, if you will. I feel that flute drums. We're going to work
That's
out.
very tasteful.
It does. It's a very tasteful
What's my
arrangement.
taste for
That's
the
what
future funeral, Jessica?
I think it's tasteful as fuck. You can judge it the way you want to judge it. But
Can we
I'm
all
here,
do the final countdown to an episode? Do-do-do.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get on my bottle right now.
Do-do.
Yeah, I think we can.
I'm trying to get a bottle on my beer bottle here. I'm trying to get
Trying to blow it.
I'm sorry. Are you suddenly from the Appalachian Mountain region and can blow on a jug? I don't think so. I think that is. I believe
This is
I
cultural
believe
appropriation.
that's an inherent skill. How dare you? What are you, a bitch at Coachella? Trying to blow into a jug? That being said, guys, we're going to come back at you next week. We'll have more guests. We'll have more of our own bullshit episodes. This was a truly outstanding one. Thank you so much, Kenny. We really enjoyed ourselves.
Thank you.
But yeah, ready to do Jackson. So, guys, we'll be back at you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.